now starting the recording, and it's my great pleasure now to discuss this very important topic for all of you. Two of our esteemed guest speaker. First of all, we are really happy to welcome a colleague of ours, Noélie Svara, who is an advisor for the Sustainable Agricultural Supply Chain Initiatives and also for part of the advisor for the Fit for Fair project. The sectoral project Sustainable Agricultural Supply Chain, and formerly known maybe from some of you as the INA program. And there she is responsible for activities in Côte d'Ivoire and Rwanda. Previously, she was part also of the INA digitalization team, which is very relevant because she was focusing on traceability and especially development of the INA trace tool and interoperability of digital systems. Before joining GIZ, also Noémie gathered experience by spending 5 years as a project manager with the consultancy firm AFC in overseeing agricultural projects in French-speaking Africa. So Noélie will speak on the EUDR regulation itself and its modalities. And following Noélie's intervention, it will be our great pleasure to then, we are especially happy to welcome Inra van Gisbergen. She's the Forest Governance Campaigner for the Forest and European Union Resource Network. It is an international NGO better known under the name BERN. She has been a Forest Governance Campaigner with BERN for over 13 years. She's a lawyer by training, and she was a solicitor at the Bar of Brussels, specialized in human rights, migration law, and refugee. And she has a long experience working with NGOs, focusing on social, environmental justice, and corporate accountability, especially in Africa. So for the many years she worked with FEAN, and on the FLGT action plan and the European Deforestation Regulation, with an emphasis on collaboration with partners in the Congo Basin. Now she works around EUDR implementation and EU's approach towards partnership with producer countries. So following Noélie setting the scene, Inra will introduce us to those next steps during these 20-25 years and talk with us about traceability and supply side measure. So it's really our pleasure to have you both here today. So let's start with you, Noélie. I will stop my screen sharing and you can now take over.
Thank you very much, Lou, for the kind introduction. Let me quickly share my screen. Will only take a little bit of time. And just my apologies. I was sick last week and my voice is still a bit recovering. So yeah, please excuse my hoarse voice today. But yeah, I hear some people that are not muted. Maybe you can all mute your microphones and then I will start. Okay, I think that's fine now. Okay, so thank you very much for having me for today's expert talk. I will give an introduction to EUDR, what it is, what its core objectives and the scope are. But before going into the details of the regulation, I would like to set the scene by showing you a video, and I hope that the sound will work for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the video goes on for about 2 more minutes, but I think you get the idea, right? There was huge forest loss between 1984, as you saw in the video, and 30 years later. And this is why EUDR is so relevant and why the EU Commission decided to have such a law. And I will go into the objectives. I will go into the objectives of the law in a couple of minutes. Okay, so as you can see in this graph, a huge amount of forest loss is related to agricultural. Okay, someone stopped, or I don't know why, but the presentation dropped. I think it's the same for you guys. I will relaunch.
Yes, it's fast, but
okay. Now it should be fine again. Okay, very good. So what this graph shows is that a huge amount of deforestation relates to agricultural activity. First of all, cattle production, as you can see here. Then the second largest commodity linked to deforestation, and that falls under EUDR, is oil palm, and then also soy, cocoa, rubber, coffee, and also fiber, so wood and fiber. This source here reports that the EU is responsible for 190,500 hectares of forest loss in the 2 years that are indicated here. And 1 second, I have to change my view here. So this was between 2019 and 2021. And the top commodities linked to the EU import of deforestation are, as shown here, cocoa, coffee, cattle, wood, oil palm, soy, and rubber. And these are also the EUDR commodities. And the top countries of origin for EU exposure on deforestation were Côte d'Ivoire, but also Brazil, Indonesia, Ghana, Malaysia. And these countries account for 61% of the EU's total imported deforestation. Okay, so this was just the quick intro, and I will now go into the details of the EUDR, the EU Regulation on Deforestation-Free Products. Here's a timeline. I will not go in all the details of this timeline, but what this timeline shows is that discussions around haltering deforestation and forest degradation already started long ago. It was a very long process, as you can see here. Discussions or studies took place in 2013, but then around 2023 or 2022, 23, these discussions accelerated and led to the adoption and entry into force of the EUDR in end of June 2023, as Veronika also already pointed out in her introduction. And as Veronika also mentioned, end of last year in December, it was decided that the EUDR would be postponed by 1 year. So the application was not as planned end of last year, but will be end of this year, 2025, the 30th of December, for the larger companies, and for the smaller companies then 6 months later in 2026. What I forgot to update here in this timeline is that by June this year, so June 2025, there should be a benchmark of the countries of production to classify the countries in low risk, middle or normal risk, and high risk. And I will go into more details later on. Okay, so what are the objectives of the EUDR? The primary objective is to minimize the EU's contribution to worldwide deforestation and forest degradation. And by this also reduce the EU's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions and biodiversity loss. And the relevant commodities that were also already mentioned previously are beef and leather, cocoa, coffee, rubber, palm oil, soy, and wood, and some derived products from these commodities. And the scope is that this regulation applies to all products, which means products that are being placed on the EU market, so imported to the EU, but then also products that are then again transformed or produced in the EU and then exported from the EU. So this makes the EUDR non-discriminatory in the sense or in the definition of the World Trade Organization, because it applies to imported and then also exported products. So what are now the conditions for placing products on the EU market or exporting from the EU? So relevant commodities, these 7 commodities can only be placed on the EU market or exported from the EU when they are deforestation-free. What does it mean? This means that no deforestation needs to have taken place after 31st of December 2020 on the plot where this specific commodity was produced. And this applies also to agroforestry, for example. So if there's palm oil production or rubber production under agroforestry, EUDR also applies to these plantations. So no conversion of forest needs to have taken place after December 2020. And for degradation, this also, this has the same cutoff date, the 31st of December 2020, which means that no conversion of primary forest or naturally regenerating forest into plantation or other wooded land may have taken place. Then also the second criteria or condition for a product to be placed or exported from the European market is that this product needs to be produced in accordance to the relevant legislation of the country of production. So there's no specific list of legislations. This is really specific to each and every country of production. For example, here you have the list, for example, land use rights, laws related to environmental protection, labor rights, etc. So these laws need to be analyzed, let's say, by the companies placing the products on the market or exporting from the EU. And this is part of the due diligence process. And this brings me to the last point. The products need to be covered by a due diligence statement. This is a document that needs to be submitted online into an online portal, the information system, and this needs to be submitted before importing the product. And this document also needs to entail the geolocation of the plot. So what are now the obligations? So there's this distinction in the EUDR between operators and traders. Operators are the ones placing commodities on the EU market or exporting from the EU market, and traders are those companies trading commodities that have already been placed on the EU market. And basically what this slide shows is that there needs to be a due diligence process, a 3-step due diligence process. This applies to large companies, to SMEs. There's only a small exception for SMEs that are traders or fall under this category. They have a bit less documentation to fulfill. I will now show you what this process looks like. I know this slide is quite full, but let me guide you through this slide. So first of all, the first step is to gather information. So this is collecting information, collecting documents, collecting data, demonstrating that the production complies with the regulation. And then it depends on this benchmarking that I mentioned in the beginning. So this low risk, medium risk, high risk classification of the country, what needs to be done as second step then. So if the country is categorized as low risk country, then we go directly to the due diligence statement, or not we, but the operators can go directly to the due diligence statement and submit the statement stating that they have gathered all the information, that it's a low risk country, and then the product can be imported to the EU. If, however, the country benchmarking classifies the country as medium or high risk country, then a risk assessment needs to be implemented. And this is step 2, the yellow bubble in the middle, which means that the operator needs to verify and analyze the collected information and documentation to assess the risk of non-compliance. So this is really a risk assessment, the risk of non-compliance. If after this risk assessment, the operator understands that there's no or negligible risk, a due diligence statement can be submitted and the product can be imported to the EU. If, however, after an analysis, the operator sees that there is a risk, then risk mitigation measures need to be put into place to reduce the risk, basically. And if the operator, through these measures or procedures, is able to reduce the risk, then the product, again, can be put on the European market. If, however, the risk is too big and it cannot be mitigated, then it's not allowed to put the product on the European market. So this is basically this 3-step due diligence process that needs to be implemented. And I think I have to go a little bit faster, Lou, right? Time's running.
Yes, but I think we are still on time.
Okay, that's good. Then there are due diligence obligations for operators. Again, this is a bit more detailed information on which kind of information, for example, should be gathered. But what's very important is that smallholders are under no direct legal obligation, which means they may be asked by the operators for documentation or for GPS data of the exact location of the plots where the product was produced, but they are not the ones doing the due diligence, 3-step due diligence process. So this falls under the activities that need to be implemented by the operators, not smallholders. So here, the points marked in pink, for example, these are aspects for which companies might ask smallholders for information: geolocation, information on deforestation-free production, information on the legality of the production, certification, additional verification through surveys or audits that were conducted, etc. And then in orange, we marked a couple of aspects from which smallholders might directly benefit. So, for example, if they can show that they are part of an indigenous group and they can show presence of indigenous groups in certain areas. Or, for example, under 3, for example, under the risk mitigation measures, these smallholders can also benefit from risk mitigation measures from capacity development and so on. So here again, I will not go much into detail, just for your information. There's this benchmarking, the risk classification of countries that is being done by the EU Commission, and the results will be published by June this year. So there's low risk, standard risk, and high risk countries. And basically, this risk classification only decreases or increases the amount of controls by the competent authorities. For low-risk countries, for example, only 1% of relevant companies will be controlled, whereas for standard risk countries, 3% of companies will be controlled, and for high-risk countries, competent authorities in the EU will check 9% of the relevant companies that import from these countries. Okay, I will also not go into the details here because the law enforcement and this whole legality aspect of the imports and also then exports from the EU, these are not of any concern for countries of production, but for the operators and traders. What I want to point out here is the role of third parties. So, for example, civil society organizations, NGOs, etc. If they are on the ground in the countries of production, they can raise their substantiated concerns if they see or hear about any risks in the supply chains, and then they can inform the competent authorities and ask for more checks or ask for controls. And this brings me now to the last slide, where I want to point out cooperation with third countries. So this is something quite special in the EUDR. The Article 30 of the EUDR obliges the EU Commission and member states to support partner countries. And for us as GIZ, this means that we are also involved in these kind of partnerships through projects. And here I just want to mention a few. So there's, for example, the EUDR engagement projects, a project where colleagues of mine are involved in. And that's a project implemented in Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Laos, to raise awareness and promote better understanding on the EUDR. Then there's also the Fit for Fair project, in which I'm working in. As Lou mentioned previously, I'm responsible for Ivory Coast and Rwanda. And here we aim at creating a conducive environment in these countries to allow supply chain actors to comply with not only the EUDR, but also the CSDDD, the Corporate Social Due Diligence Directive, and the German supply chain law. Then there's also a Team Europe initiative with its flagship program called SAFE, Sustainable Agriculture for Forest Ecosystems. And I think Indra will maybe also go a little bit into these details. So there is support through projects, and this is what this cooperation with third countries is all about. And this was it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Noeli, for introducing us or reintroducing us to the regulation, its content. I think that was a great way to remind everyone, but also set the scene also for maybe Indra now. So as I say now, we are ready to go more deeply into, okay, we have one more year, having also an NGO perspective and see, okay, what are the supply side measures that are put in place, and dig deeper also into the traceability topic. So Indra, you can share your screen as well. Yes. And take the floor.
That is Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm now sharing the screen. Is this readable right now?
It is working well.
Yes, you see the whole screen because I only see, yeah.
We see
Okay.
a full slide, the first full slide.
Okay, perfect. So, hello, everybody. My name is Indra, nicely introduced already by Lou. Well, I'm working for the organization Fern, and Fern is in fact just the meaning of the plant. It's a plant that comes back everywhere in every forest in the world. It's a very ancient plant, and so it's a symbol somehow of resilience and also resistance. And also it's related to many other species in a forest. So what we try to do, it's an organization not very big, based here in Brussels, and we like to work on making the EU work for forest and people. So the human and social component is definitely a very big element of the work that we do. And what we do is, in fact, advocacy work or policy work, and that is always based on research and fact-finding, and we often work together with experts on the ground and on different specialists on different topics. And based on that fact-finding evidence that we gather on the field, we try to influence EU policies related to forest and people. So we do have 5 campaigns focusing as well on European forests, but also on deforestation provoked by supply chains and provoked by what we eat and what is on our plate. And so we analyze always what can the EU do to make sure forest and people are protected. And so that is why we also got an interest in addressing deforestation in supply chains, and why we've been campaigning for a package of measures at EU level. Fern is also working not in isolation. We're less than 20 people, so it's only 18 people based in Brussels and in England, but we work with a large range of partners in the ground, allied partners, so CSO organizations with whom we share the same goals and the same theory of change, and we try to team up and see what can be done in the different countries as well as at EU level. And so one of the major goals that we try to put forward is creating that space where voices can be heard from the ground in different policy levels. So creating space inside a specific country, but also at European level. And so through, for example, lobby tours or policy tours here in Brussels, we try to knock on the right doors and give the floor to CSOs, indigenous people, or local communities. And so knowing where to knock, on which door to knock, that also, and what to say, and also to be somehow a bit ahead of the game, we try to interact as much as possible on a continuous basis with EU policymakers. So that means interacting with the people at the European Parliament level, the people working at the Commission, but also in the member states, as different member states of the EU compose, in fact, the Council. And all these 3 organs, the European Parliament, the Commission, and also the Council, are the co-legislators, for example, also of the EUDR, the European Deforestation Regulation, which we will discuss today. So working in synergies, building coalitions is very important, and thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to be in touch with a lot of people from a lot of countries we've not yet interacted with. And so I'm very, very grateful to have this opportunity to share our views on the EUDR. So I would like to come back. Noélie has given already a brilliant expose about what the EUDR is about, why it is there. But I would like to come back a little bit on the fact that the whole discussion started, I think, around 2013. So it's more than 10 years that we're campaigning for a regulation. But we have always been stressing the fact that regulatory norms or rules in itself to regulate what comes into the EU is in itself not enough, but we need a robust plan of action for addressing deforestation in supply chains, well, around the globe. And that is why in 2019, there has been a plan of action, stepping up action, EU action to restore and protect forests. And that defines, in fact, a package or presents a package of measures to be taken. And so in that package, you have 5 pillars that you can divide in, on the one hand, demand side measures, so measures to be taken in Europe, supply side measures, and also monitoring measures. And so in the demand side measures, you will have the EUDR, the European Deforestation Regulation, that is in fact the flagship or landmark regulation that aims to reduce deforestation in different supply chains. But I always come back on the existence of this action plan, because the other pillars of the action plan are very valuable as well, and the EUDR is not the silver bullet. And already in 2019, it has been identified that engaging with producer countries and consumer countries, such as India and China or Vietnam, is also tremendously important to halt deforestation. And international cooperation, making also trade agreements, is also very important, as well as a green finance. So these 3 elements are part of the supply side measures that already back more over 5 years it has been identified. But today, I think there has been very much a focus on the EUDR, so one of the components, and less to the rest. And I think also engaging with producer countries is a lot of your concern, and also something that may interest a lot of African countries as participating at this call today. Monitoring, evaluating, and doing this on a continuous basis to see how much the deforestation is progressing or is being halted is also tremendously important, especially as we see that climate change is, impacting more and more. It is also informing us very much to what extent we have to accelerate the application of new rules and so on, and how urgent the different measures that have been identified need to hit the ground, in fact. So this said, I wanted to say that the EUDR, it exists now, and it came into force last year. It will be applicable in 2025, but it has been a long journey. CSOs around the world have been campaigning for regulatory action from the EU since over 10 years. What has been very important in this campaign is unite forces. There have been different campaigns, lots of coalitions, lots of people. For example, here in this picture, delegations from Brazil, Indonesia, Colombia, and many other countries, Ivory Coast, and what you name it, that have been visiting the European Parliament, the Commission, over the past, I think, 5 years, to really tell the stories from the ground, and that combating deforestation is super urgent, and that, for example, because of soy exports to Europe, indigenous people are really losing a lot, and so surviving is really very difficult. So access to information, training, organizing these lobby tours has been very much important, and it will continue to be very much important as well, because this the EUDR exists, but it's not yet, the results are not yet felt on the ground. And so we will need to continue to do that work of liaising with each other, assessing regularly, checking in, and bringing also the voices to the European Union. So these are some pictures of what has happened. Just to say that this EUDR got a backing of 1.2 million people who responded to a survey that the EU launched, and that called, in fact, for regulation. So after a period, an era of certification, it was clear that certification, for example, is not good enough, but that we needed rules, binding rules. And so it's important to bear that in mind, that it's been a long process. Lots of people have been participating on this and have been backing on supportive to the regulation. So, but when it became reality and the text was finalized and came into force last year, there have been a lot of reactions going in lots of different directions and not always that positive. So last year we had European elections here, and so very surprising, there has been a lot of pushback against the EUDR from within Europe, also instigated by some parties participating at European elections. And so one of the big concerns was that the EUDR, which is applicable not only from producer countries but as well from what is produced within Europe, for example, timber that is produced in Europe, is also operators should also respect the EUDR obligations. And so we've seen forest or timber traders here in Europe also pushing back hard on the EUDR. There have been also concerns raised by important producer countries such as Brazil and Indonesia. And one of the concerns that a lot of countries, but also companies raise is, this will be really very difficult for smallholders to comply with EUDR obligations. But as Noélie said it very well before, there are no direct obligations for smallholders. It's the operators and traders who have obligations under EUDR. But of course, the smallholders are down the supply chains of certain commodities, such as cocoa, coffee, and to some extent also rubber and palm oil. And of course, the fear is that the burden of proof, or the burden to collect the different pieces of information, for example, the polygon data, the burden will be put on the smallholders, and also the costs will be put on the back of the smallholders. And that, of course, will have negative impacts on the revenues of smallholders. But there have been lots of mixed reactions, and smallholder groups have been saying, for example, also from Ivory Coast and in Indonesia from palm oil, that they were delighted to have a regulation, that the regulation would be also beneficial for smallholders if, of course, carried out well, and if there were solid accompanying measures. And so the smallholder groups have been saying, the EUDR will also help us to improve transparency and to improve also our ownership of the data, and also to table essential issues such as, for example, the price. And so you do have mixed reactions and views. Also from companies, some companies have been on board for a very long time. And for example, the cocoa companies have been quite supportive, very explicit about it, because they also made efforts in getting ready. And so the front runners, they definitely were not so happy with the fact that the EUDR's application date was delayed with 1 year, because they invested quite a lot last year in their readiness. So there have been reactions, but it's very important, I think, to have a close look who is behind the pushback. And for example, it's two cutting edges when saying that companies per se are against this EUDR, or smallholders are per se against EUDR. Nuance is needed there. But NGOs, because this has been a long story, they definitely were in favor of not dropping the ball. A lot of NGOs were advocating for the immediate application of the EUDR as planned, and were not that much in favor of the 1 year delay. And that was the essence of the campaign, hands off the EUDR. So what about smallholders and EUDR? So Noélie said it already, the obligation is on the companies, so the operators and the traders, to collect the information, do the risk assessment, and mitigate the supplier's risk. So it's rather the companies, operators, and traders who do have an obligation to, if suppliers, so smallholders, cannot follow, or there is a risk they will not have the data at hand, to support them. And this can be done through traceability systems. And especially there is concern about the smallholders in very specific supply chains, such as cocoa, coffee, rubber, and palm oil. So, as I said before, it's important to see very closely who says that this is a threat to smallholders. It's very positive that we've been able to hear the voices of smallholder groups, but unfortunately, not in all countries, smallholders are well organized, so they can also lift their voices to a European level, and they do often not have a very strong representation that can bring their voices to the table. So that is a big challenge, we believe, to pick up in the supply side measures. So Article 30 has been mentioned before, is our legal hook to engage with third countries. The supply side countries, so the producer countries, but also the other consuming countries. And so the aim of introducing Article 30 is also a reminder that there is more to be done to address deforestation than only making sure legally produced and zero deforestation products arrive in Europe, but there is also a need to address the root causes of deforestation, and that can be done through partnerships and cooperation. And so it's important, and Noélie said it already, that this is done in a coordinated approach, that there is engagement from the EU in a coordinated approach, that there is this a robust and comprehensive strategic framework for engagement with the third countries, and that there is full participation of all stakeholders when engaging in partnerships. That means there is engagement needed with civil society, indigenous peoples, local communities, women, and smallholders. What you see here on this slide is what is also referring to the text of the law. And so the text of the Article 30 mentioned the development of the strategic framework for guiding, in fact, the partnerships with third countries. And we've been putting or asking for the development of such a strategic framework, if possible, as soon as possible. But unfortunately, it took the Commission quite some time to develop that. And on the 2nd of October, so the same date as the Commission proposed to delay the EUDR, they also published their strategic framework for international cooperation. And so we've done an analysis of that framework, and to our regrets, it not is fully what we had expected. Well, we heard already the strategic framework would not be so strong, but in our analysis, we put forward that the fact, or underline the fact, that the strategic framework is no longer comprehensive, and it also limits, it's limited to international cooperation. So it kind of drops the ball on the element of partnerships, which to our analysis or view is really quite disappointing. Moreover, the strategic framework mentions the favoring engagement with civil society and women and smallholders and so on, whereas the law in itself, it obliges the full participation of these groups. So in that sense, the strategic framework is even a little bit weaker than the law itself. Neither the framework presents clear guidance on how to achieve the goals. And it is also not super clear what the interaction is with the forest partnerships that the Commission tries to bring to life. And so it's also a little bit blank on the interaction with consumer countries. And so we also wonder how the Commission will pick up its role in terms of coordination, which is also a very important element. But nevertheless, even if this tool is not exactly what we had hoped for, there are very positive developments on the supply side measures. There is this Team Europe initiative that Noélie mentioned already, and we really hope that the missing parts of the strategic framework will be plugged into the existing initiatives, such as the Team Europe's initiatives, which is, in fact, a key tool. Team Europe's initiatives means that the different member states who engage in this in the supply side measures, that they put also their resources together and they develop a overall comprehensive plan of action. And so for the moment, there is 81 million euros on the table, and these will be used to serve different flagship programs, as, for example, the SAFE program, which will be operational in 10 countries and which is heavily supported by Germany, including GIZ. We wonder that whether the 81 million euros will be enough to really address the massive challenges of countries, forested countries around the world. It's a starting point, it's a beginning, but we definitely hope that Germany and others will be supported by other donors as well, and that we will see more money on the table. Not only money, but also resources such as diplomats and people as well, who can really engage in the continuous dialogues, which is not only about aid, but is a lot about also dialogues about trade and politics, in fact. But of course, well, the Team Europe exists, is very positive. It's very possible also to do better in terms of the partnerships approach. And first and foremost, it is an opportunity for addressing the smallholder needs. Smallholder needs which can be different from one commodity to another and from one region to another, from one country to another. For example, the needs of a coffee producer, smallholder in Ethiopia may be very different than smallholders in Brazil producing coffee, for example, where they are maybe better organized in cooperatives and so on. So addressing the smallholder needs, which are tailor-made, is an opportunity that the TEI can address. Then also support independent monitoring of the deforestation production and legality is something that is also possible. Monitoring what is going on in the field is an enormous challenge ahead of us, because, of course, we do not want to see perverse or negative impacts of this deforestation regulation. And so understanding what this means for a specific context is key. And often NGOs and smallholder groups are the agents who could really be the big watchdogs on what's happening in the field. And in a lot of countries, such as Brazil, for example, CSO are under pressure and often threatened because, for the monitoring work that they do. So it's very important that with this funding, they're also supported. And then I come to this thing, a major support we hope that the TEI will deliver is also the development of national, credible, robust, and transformative traceability systems. Traceability systems will be an important tool to implement and enforce as well the EUDR. So it's until the plot of land that the the coordinates need to be put in the information system. And so it is very important that accessible traceability systems will be developed in each country and also for the different supply chains. Last year, we published a report that is online. You can easily find it on our website. I'm not sure whether this QR code works. I did not test it yesterday.
I will retest it before we send the presentation.
Yes, I will test it and make sure that the right voice is in there. So Fern, but also lots of other organizations in Europe, but also in Indonesia, in Ivory Coast, and so on, contributed to this report. And we came to the conclusion that national or at least public traceability systems are very important because they also maximize the chance that also smallholders' rights will be protected and that also their needs and priorities will be addressed. We have identified some criteria to keep in mind when developing traceability systems, and ideally it would be fantastic if all 10 criteria that we identified would be integrated in traceability systems that are now under development. And so this 1 year extra that we get will also be a very important year to develop these kind of tools. And so in the 12 months ahead, we hope that we can continue to have the conversation around what are the building blocks of a credible and well-working traceability system. Quickly we'll go because time is advancing.
Yes, if you could keep it under 10 minutes, it would be nice so we have time for the closing and for some questions as well.
Good. I will go quickly. So the first 7, the set of 7 criteria, we think these are necessary to keep in mind to have a credible traceability system. And these elements include, for example, that there needs to be a multi-stakeholder consultation body. It's also important that the system in itself is periodically scanned and assessed by independent audits. It's important that it has a grievance mechanisms, and it's important that smallholders are given control and access to the data. We have identified 3 extra criteria to make sure that it really has transformative effect on the ground. And so it's very important that it tracks characteristics that are important for all stakeholders, so not only for the companies, but also for smallholders and third parties, such as NGO monitors. It's very important as well that such a traceability system is clearly linked to incentives for producer countries. And that is where, for example, there is a link that can be made between the benchmarking and traceability system. For example, if you are a country of high risk, but then there is a trajectory that will be developed together with the Commission to move from a high-risk country to a low-risk country, part of that trajectory could be working together on a credible traceability system that also will help you to really improve the reputation of the producer country, for example. So we have also in that report presented some key recommendations for producer and also countries and the Commission. And we definitely would like to see that in the short term, the data sets are made publicly available. And so developing national traceability systems, that is not happening overnight. So in the medium time, we also see, and that's very positive, that companies are teaming up to have an interoperable traceability system. And that, of course, is already a first step in the right direction to share also the data between companies. But of course, it's very important that also smallholders have access to the data. For the longer term, we hope that the countries will really also support the development of public traceability systems, and also discuss with donors such as the Commission, for example, to have long-term funding, because a participatory approach to develop a strong traceability system that needs time, and organizing these consultations also requires resources, and we definitely hope that the TEI and SAFE programs can contribute to this. So, last slide. The game is definitely not over. 2025 will be a crucial year to make sure that there is EUDR readiness by companies, but also that we do have a plan of action to address the root causes in a long-term, with a long-term vision. So EUDR implementation will be topic of the agenda of the EU. So there will be a lot of discussions about the benchmarking. It's also for NGOs and others an opportunity to engage with the Commission about the details of the country benchmarking. EUDR enforcement is key, because if we end up with a regulation that does not work properly and is not biting, then we kind of fail. So preparing the substantiated concerns, but also understanding what companies are doing is really of major importance. So collecting evidence, fact-finding missions, continuous dialogue with companies and platforms is very important. So also at supply side measure, there is lots of things that we can do this year. So EUDR support programs need to deliver, but maybe also expanded, and would like to come back on the funding challenge. We hear that in Europe there will be budget cuts, but this is a very important priority that should not slip through our fingers. Without robust support measures, and EUDR may not deliver as we had hoped for. So the creating space and having everybody on board is also in the respective countries something that is very important. It is already happening, but maybe at a different pace and in different modalities, depending on the different countries. But so we really hope that for this year to come, there will be enough political support as well from the EU, but also from the producer countries. And we really hope that smallholders, indigenous people, women in these groups, and also local communities will be part of the exercise and the game. Good luck with all the work, and happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Indra, for your passionate, let's say, plaidoyer. I forgot the English word as well, and also for highlighting opportunities as well as known challenges to our group. You could maybe see the chat was going let's say, crazy with questions. So there is a lot of interest and still a lot to clarify. First of all, thank you, Noélie, for starting answering those questions. I think right now what we should do, because we will not have time to answer everything, is that we will document everything, and together with the presentation, we will send you this Q&A for the question we sadly won't be able to answer today. I see two hands. So I will first ask a question from the chat that has received a lot of likes, and then I will give people the floor. So there was a question really on the really what qualifies as degradation? What are the parameters to measure degradation? It is really on the topic of the law itself. What are those parameters? Maybe Noélie, you can give an answer, or Indra. How do we qualify that the land has been deforested or is degraded?
So yeah, I can answer this question, and to make it easier, I will also directly post the definition here in the chat. So degradation means the changes in a forest structure or composition that significantly and negatively affects its ecological functions, health, productivity, or biodiversity. So this is the forest degradation definition used in the EUDR. I hope this already helps.
Mm-hmm. I think so. And then it's measured by analyzing the maps, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So satellite imagery is key. And then this check between the cutoff date, the 31st of December 2020, and the date the product was produced on a specific plot.
Thank you, Noélie. I think also another, maybe Indra, if you want to add something on that one. Otherwise, I think there was a, yeah.
It's linked to questions related to agroforestry, and as Noélie said, forest that is converted to agricultural land is seen as not deforestation free. It can lead to degradation. However, if there are old agroforests, for example, of cocoa, if this agroforest cocoa is existing since 2020, there will not be a problem. And so there has also been a lot of discussion about fallow lands, for example. So pieces of land that, or forest that has been converted in the past to agroforest and then be left alone. And then what if these, and then the forest came back, what if these pieces of land are now serving to cultivate cocoa? Are these deforestation free or not? There are a lot of discussions ongoing per country, and it will also largely depend on the legislation, because you always have to bear in mind that what is legal according to the national law, that is key. So if, for example, agroforestry in protected areas, well, then it's illegally produced. So that will not qualify it as deforestation or legal product. So the details, which are often complex, deserve as well to be looked at closely according to the national context, I think.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. I will give the floor to, I hope I'm going to pronounce the name right, Maxas Musenda. I invite you to open your microphone and maybe camera if you can, and just ask your question. Maybe the connection is not working as well. So Maxas, Mr. Musenda, we will come back to you if you can when your connection works better. But I saw also a hand of Mr. Escipion Joaquim Oliveira Gomez. So I invite you to, yes, perfect, it worked. We can see you great and hear you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes, I am Escipion. I am from the International Trade Center. And first of all, I wanted to thank GIZ, the OECPS, European Union, and all the organizers of this event. I think that ITC and myself, in previous capacity, we have been very much involved in I would say, explaining the new environmental and social governance regulations in trade. And we're happy to see that it's ongoing. I would like maybe to ask a question to the first presenter on the benchmarking. Some time ago, the OECPS did a study and considered that the benchmarking was not compatible with the World Trade Organization rules. And I know that part has been withheld by the European Union, among others, giving pushback at the WTO. So I wanted to have the view of the presenter on that one. because I think it's the weakest point of the regulation, and maybe not necessarily something that is very positive if it can be challenged. Then on the second presenter, I just wanted to say that the ITC has been working with the OECPS in the European Union a lot in promoting traceability, in promoting understanding. And I hope that this new year, this extra year that we have, from my contacts in developing countries, I myself being from a developing country, they has been received well, the extra year to prepare. In previous discussions, what we had advocated is that developing countries should have a seat at the table when we're discussing these regulations, and that we have time and money to adapt. In that sense, ITC has been working very closely with the OECPS Secretariat, with the European Commission, COLEA and others to promote understanding by developing countries, especially OECPS. And we have put in place traceability systems in countries that nowadays have geolocalized thousands of farmers. So we are ready to keep on the discussion. Something that we're doing is also working with the European delegations in country and with European member states embassies, training them something similar to what you just did, as to ensure that the delegations in country, especially those that do not have necessarily a trade desk, and the European embassies as well, are knowledgeable of the new regulations. We're ready to support. We're very proud of being part of this process, especially under the business-friendly program in which ITC works with the EU and the OECPS and at your service. So maybe only one, again, the question on benchmarking to the first presenter and to the second presenter, that the extra year, I think we have to use it wisely altogether. Thank you. I'm sorry if I was long.
No worries. Thank you so much for your extensive questions. I will let Noeli and Indra answer, and then I will take another question from the chat that was asked earlier.
Yeah, thanks for the question. However, I don't know enough, I think, about these discussions on benchmarking and World Trade Organization laws or regulations. So I cannot say much about it. I'm really sorry. I just know that last year when this whole discussion on postponement came up, that it was discussed, or that some people ask for a no risk classification for EUDR, but this was then again dismissed, right? But with this 1 year postponement came the very specific ask that the benchmarking needs to be in place by June this year, and it needs to be published. So this is all I can say right now. Maybe Indra, you have more information?
Yes, I think from different producer countries, the concern has been put up or shared that it's not WTO compliant. But I think that is a worry from the Commission since the start. And so this has been researched quite thoroughly by the legal service of the EC. Also, NGOs have been doing some assessments. And as it's also applicable to all operators and companies, there is no discrimination vis-a-vis other external countries. So it's also applicable to the EU. So I think there are some papers that already have been developed on WTO compliance, but it is definitely an issue to be continued. And one of the countries who had large reservations was Indonesia, and for the moment there is an Indonesia-Malaysia task force with the EU that has been set up, a multi-stakeholder task force where these things are also discussed, I believe. Maybe I can come back on what you said. I cannot agree more. I think with you that we should use 2025 wisely. Indeed, there are not a lot of resources on the table, but it's a beginning. So let's address the priorities and the essentials. Let's coordinate and make sure we team up together and noses are in the same direction, because climate change cannot wait. We postpone this, but at the same time, we see in the US, regions are on fire, and even if there is less media coverage, this is also happening in lots of countries in Africa. So climate change requires urgent measures. So we really hope that there will be enough political support and also action from lots of actors. So I cannot agree with you more. And we're very eager to team up as well with ITC. So yeah, ITC thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliveira. I think it was a very important point as well to discuss. And I think in the chat, we have the different levels also of partners, actors that are present, because I want to bring up maybe some questions that are really directed maybe from people from producing countries that are asking themselves, but will it not decrease the production of the crops, like discourage it? Or why are the smallholders going to be paid premium for deforestation product? Is there going to be market benefit for them? So maybe we can a little bit address that. So will these smallholders be excluded from the process, or are they going to benefit from maybe price premiums for compliance?
Mm-hmm. Maybe I can say something about the issue of fair price or living income. It was definitely something that we wanted to get better language in the law about. In the version that was the version of the European Parliament of the law, it did have provisions on fair trade and living income. However, this has been checked out or taken out in later negotiations. So nothing is provided by the law itself. However, this creation of spaces for dialogue and the need to address the root causes offers a window of opportunities to table as well these very essential issues. And so for the moment, the Sustainable Cocoa Initiative in Ivory Coast and Ghana, and also Cameroon, addresses this. It has not been regulated by law, but de facto it is part of the conversation, and we really hope that it also shifts. I mean, it will be put up on the priority list. When there are discussions about possible sustainability investment agreements with cocoa producing countries, we really hope that the issue of price and living income will also be picked up. So EUDR is an entry point, but just an entry point. Yeah.
Thank you. We will take one last question from Mr. Edum. I see Mr. Samuel Nobel Kake from Ghana also has his hand up. Maybe I could invite you to write your question in the chat, and we will answer in the Q&A in the email, because I don't think we will have time for 2 questions with the closing. So Mr. Edum, please, the floor is yours. If you could keep your question concise, we will very much appreciate it. This time as well, I'm not sure the connection is working, so I will give you the floor, Mr. Kwakwe, if I pronounce it right, for your question. And Mr. Edum, you can write your question in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so my question has to do with the legal component of the EUDR, and also have to do with the child labor component. I see that today, our presentation today was so clear with traceability and also with the deforestation issue. Now, if a country is implementing its own child labor monitoring system, how are the companies going to report this? Because if you look at even the German supply law and also the CS3D, the responsibility is on companies and not the producing countries. And so how are we going to fulfill the component of legality and child labor in meeting the EUDR?
Thank you so much for your question. I will, Indra, if you want to, I see your, and then, or Noélie, whoever wants to
very
start.
quickly, it's a relevant legislation that has to be taken into account. So if Ghana or another country has particular relevant, so linked to agricultural supply chains legislation that needs to be taken into account. For example, on child labor, it definitely is linked to the obligations of the company. So it's very important that this year, for every country, the identification of the legal framework that needs to be taken into account will be identified, and it's clear also what companies should look at and what falls into the scope of the legal framework and what is not relevant. And that in itself is a whole discussion where we hope that civil society, but also trade unions or different relevant stakeholders will contribute to. For example, also environmental law will be important. There has been some guidance that the EC has been given and what is understood by relevant legislation, and there is also quite a reference to human rights. So I would say existing legislation on child labor is definitely part of the whole area or the whole framework that a company needs to look at. But Noélie maybe can complete me.
And maybe if I just can add something to this quickly. So if I'm not mistaken, then this EU information system into which the due diligence statements need to be uploaded to, there will also be the possibility for governments of producer countries to submit or to fill in templates for legislation. So if, for example, I think you were from Ghana, in Ghana, for example, there is specific legislation that is relevant for EUDR, then there will be templates that can be filled in and then submitted to the information system so that they are available to all the operators who are sourcing from these countries.
Thank you so much, both of you, for answering. As I say, we will combine the last question in the Q&A that we will send with the presentation. I want to give another round of applause. I know there is no PowerPoint presentation, so thank you so much, Indra. Thank you so much, Noélie, for taking from your time and informing us, educating, and answering the question from all our participants today. And you saw that it was very wide-ranging, and there is a lot of interest, and this new year of readiness is really welcome, and there are decisive next steps to be taken. And now for the closing, we will have a special closing that also is going to be a closing of transition. So Magnus, I give you the word.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Indra. Thank you also, Noélie, for your contributions. I think this was a very deep insight view and a very good discussion. Thank you also to Lou, Stefan, and Veronica, who have organized this expert talk today. And this is one of my last hours in the project because I will leave the project as a head of project, and I will start a new job starting from Friday in the Congo. I will be GIZ cluster coordinator for the good governance in the mining sector there. And I'm very happy that the successor is already here. And I'm very happy to present to you and to give the floor Lynn Feldkötter, who will from now on take over. Lynn, the floor is yours. Please come in.
Yes. Good afternoon to everyone. So thank you, Marcus, and of course, thank you, Indra and Noélie, for the presentation. It was really helpful for me to get the first insight. What does the expert talk mean concretely in practice? And Lou, of course, thanks for the moderation. So I really appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself and of course also to say a big thank you to Magnus, who is now taking a lot of time to organize the handover. And I can say since yesterday, I got a lot of information, and I'm very excited to know and to learn more about the project. So as a new team leader of the Agri-Business facility for Africa, I'm also very keen to know all of the stakeholders of all the parties, and also of the team. So allow me to introduce myself in some sentences. My educational background is in political science, and I have been with GIZ, or let's say former GTZ at that time, since 2003. When I started with the internship, like many colleagues in our organization, we start with the internship. So since then, I have been working in several countries. First of all, it was like a technical advisor for environment education and local economic development in Vietnam, and also in Southeast Asia. I spent there 2 years, and then come back to Ashbourne for 7 years as a desk officer for many African countries such as Cameroon, Chad, Benin, Togo. And then I spent more than 5 years in Madagascar, work as a head of a program on adaptation on agriculture value chain to climate change. And my last assignment was in Iraq as head of human relations. So you can see I have quite a broader experience within GIZ. Yeah, and I joined the ABF team since yesterday. So that's all very quick from my side. I'm very excited to learn more about the project, learn more about the team, learn more about all our partners in the program. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much, and back to you, Lou.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for your first official closing of Expert Talk, also first Expert Talk of the year.
We don't hear you anymore.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I was saying sorry. Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you so much, Magnus. Thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you to our translators in the background, and to Jana, who helped with the technical support. Thank you for closing the first Expert Talk of the year, Lynn. We are very grateful. And we have other Expert Talks from last year on our YouTube channels, topics on inclusive climate action, food safety, EU corporate sustainable due diligence initiatives. So do not hesitate to rewatch them. And a big thanks to our experts today. And then Happy New Year's and a great rest of the day to all of you. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Have a
Bye-bye.
nice day.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.